Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar on Is RPA Enough? I'm Ivan, I work for Maximize IT, who are experts within intelligent automation to enable operational excellence. Now, today's webinar features our guest speaker, Danilo McGarry. Now, in his 15-year career in this space, he has overseen over 1,200 automation projects and to date has delivered circa of over $250 million in savings. Now, a recent Gartner survey stated that enterprises are aiming to reduce operational costs by at least 30% by 2024. Now, we're really looking forward to hearing Danilo's and everyone's thoughts on is RPA enough and how this will benefit customers and organizations alike to achieve high ROI from automation projects and reduce operational costs. Now, if everyone attending can think of some questions to ask Danilo in the Q&A at the end, that will be grand. But we actually have a couple of poll questions as well. So I don't know if you want to get up the first poll question just to get things going. So if everyone can see that. So does your company have a visible and well communicated automation initiative? If you would like to answer. Just wait for a few more results to come in. Okay, that's interesting. So 64% of people are saying no, 36% of people are saying yes. Okay. Now, just to manage the expectations, we are running this webinar live, so please bear with us if you see anything going on in the background. Danilo, thank you for joining. And I'll let you introduce yourself and kick off with the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivan. I appreciate it, and thanks Maximize IT as well. So today's topic is, is RPA enough? I think it's a very relevant topic. Nowadays we are bombarded by different solutions which are available in the market. We have the technology vendors such as UiPath, Blue Prism, etc. And then we have vendors which are coming to light with great ideas and great new offerings as well, such as Maximize IT. We have implementation partners, we have advisory firms. There's a whole bunch that's in the mix at the moment. And on top of that, there's a lot of different technologies as well, such as RPA, OCR, NLP, and AI, which are those two things I mentioned before as well. So a lot of times companies and people end up getting a bazooka in order to swat the fly, which you can appreciate is a bit of an overkill. So, I'm not surprised by today's poll. 40% of you say that you do have a clear communication strategy on automation. 60% said no. So I've seen worse polls than that, but that's not surprising at all. So I hope today to clarify some of that. I hope to give you a couple of pointers so that you can then go back in your company and discuss these things and try to help in the fight against mundane, boring work by using automation. So like I said, RPA, especially now, and a lot of the other technology stacks, they've become really off the shelf. AI is becoming off the shelf now. And, it's very difficult to understand what to do, which vendor to go and utilize, how to set things up, how to get your company ready, because it's a very fast-moving market. It's a bit like the telecommunications market when, the Motorola was out with the Razr phone. All of a sudden, they took over Nokia. 6 months later, Apple became number one. 2 years later, Samsung is number one, and now it's kind of Huawei, Samsung, and somebody else. So it's a very fast-moving market. Which I hope in this presentation to demystify some of that, break down some of the different issues that exist in the market as well, just to help you fragment it better in your mind. So first of all, to answer the question, is RPA enough? We need to ask another question, because that's not the right question to ask right at the beginning. The first thing is, what is it you're trying to automate? Are you trying to just automate copy and pasting, reconciliations? Or are you trying to automate a whole data strategy? Are you trying to automate the way that you collect information on your clients? Are you trying to sell a product to your clients? Are you trying to sell them intelligence? these are two very, very different things. And often, automation programs and companies, they get lost and they don't have a clear vision because they try to do everything. And it's not possible to do everything because, first of all, you need to start somewhere. And second of all, depending what you want to do, what is the goal, you require a very different setup and a very different kind of skill set. So very important to ask in the beginning, what is it that you're trying to achieve? It's often quite a healthy thing to have brainstorming sessions in the company, get a committee set up with people from IT, with people from operations, from finance, and different departments, to then start thinking, okay, well, we need to automate a couple of things. We have a lot of pain points in the company. Every company does have that. What are the low-hanging fruits? This is often the best place to start. What are the low-hanging fruits? And what is those low-hanging fruits? Is it very simple tasks, or is it very, very high-end, skilled jobs and processes that you're trying to do? So that's often a good place to start. Get a brainstorm going. Get a good representation of the company in that committee. Don't make it too big. I think up to 20 people, 15 people is enough to start. And then later on, you can break out into larger groups. So that's often, when I see that, that's often a good sign that a company is organizing themselves the right way in order to get, automation off to a good start. Then there's the issue of, do you even know what automation is? I constantly read articles, even in reputable, journals, with people who even work in automation, describing RPA incorrectly and describing artificial intelligence incorrectly. And you have to really look out for that, because the word artificial intelligence sounds very sexy. It sells stories, right? It's the hot topic of today. RPA, not so sexy. So a lot of people, whether they're practitioners talking about their programs, whether they are companies trying to sell you ideas and sell you services, they often bring up this topic of AI. Oh, it's hyper automation, it's intelligent automation, it's AI. So be very careful with that. I think at the end of the day, if you think about the company, if you think about what you're trying to achieve, it's really important that you don't try to make things sexier than they are. It is what it is. I'm sure that everybody will eventually get to AI capability, but you need to start with RPA, and there's a couple of reasons for that, which I'll go into the next slide. By breaking down and demystifying all of these buzzwords and using them correctly, you're then able, along with the brainstorms and the committee that I said is important to kick off in the beginning, you're then able to start, putting together a goal, starting to put together a vision for the company, which, if you haven't done that, I can also help you in this presentation as well. So, couple of things there to sort out, a couple of things to get your company organized in the first place. A lot of companies think they've already cracked these questions. These are not easy questions to answer. Depending who you ask in the company, you'll get different answers. So that's why it's good to get diversity in that committee. It's good to get representation from different departments, because your vision and goal should be an all-encompassing goal. It should be representative of what the company is trying to achieve. And a lot of times, a vision doesn't make sense because it's being determined by one department or by even one person. And they haven't consulted everybody else because they're trying to be that champion, the person who got automation started. There's a lot of conflicts of interest in an automation program. A lot of people know it's an important thing. It's a great thing to do. They want to be the people who get recognition for that program because they know it's going to make a massive impact. But at the same time, people on the floor who fear losing their jobs, which doesn't happen in most cases, but people who fear that, they need to work with you as well. And, there's a conflict of interest there. Why should they give you automation ideas that you're going to end up automating? So it's amazing, really, how complicated the automation program can get, given the different things that people want from it, given human nature, and given politics in a company. So just be wary of that. That's why perhaps most of you don't have a clear goal and vision on what automation is trying to achieve, because of all of these complicated reasons, which I'm happy to discuss more offline as well, but we're short for time, so we'll press on. So, in order to have RPA, do you need artificial intelligence? In order to have artificial intelligence, do you need AI? The answer is no. They are very different things. RPA is very much a process-driven approach to looking at problems. How is a process done? Let's replicate it and get it done by a robot. AI is very driven by data. How to structure data, how is it coming in, how is data being fed, how is data being filtered, etc. So it's very driven by what data tells you and what you're looking for in data and how you want to structure the data. So they're completely different worlds. It doesn't mean that one doesn't do what the other does. It's like the example I gave you of killing a fly with a bazooka. If you use AI to do a very simple reconciliation, that's like killing a fly with a bazooka. You should use RPA for that. But you can't use RPA for analyzing the traffic patterns in Europe so that your workers can get to work quicker or something like that, right? Because that requires a lot of data manipulation and management. So RPA wouldn't be able to do that. It would be able to help, but it wouldn't be able to do most of it. So they're very different. The companies that you hire, the developers that you need, in RPA you need business analysts. In AI you need data scientists. Very different types of people, very different salaries, very different ways of communicating and behaving as employees. So totally different teams there. Very rarely does an RPA team become a fully fledged expert AI team, and even more rarely does an AI team become a fully fledged RPA capable team. So quite often you need to have two teams there, and sometimes for superstars you can transition them between both because they've learned both. So I hope that makes sense. And if you have questions on that, please let me know, and I'd love to hear different viewpoints. So very different. My recommendation would be to make sure that you start off just by getting the company culture warmed up to the idea of automation. Don't even mention automation in the beginning. We've got some buzzwords from the late 2000s, process reengineering, lean, Six Sigma. Get a bit of that out. Get people trained in those faculties first, and get them out into the business, thinking about how to do things better, looking for common processes that are done between departments that could be functionalized. Give an example. Most companies have to make payments. They pay companies they deal with. They pay all kinds of things, and quite often in companies I end up seeing 20, 30 different payment teams. But in fact, payments are payments. There's an invoice. There's a bank account you got to pay to, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't get that much more complicated. Of course, you have reconciliations and checks in the background. So that's one way that reengineering can start getting the company a little bit leaner, thinking a little bit more about how to do things better by just thinking about the basic fact of becoming leaner and better. Okay. By doing that, you'll show the company that you can make a lot of savings by just thinking leaner, by just thinking how to do the tasks that you have to do for your clients every day more smartly, right? And that's going to get the company culture transforming into becoming more of a process-driven organization, a data-driven organization. Then that's going to get attention from seniors, seniors as in C-level, managing directors, etc. And they're going to start opening up to the fact that, you might need something slightly more sophisticated than just maybe Excel macros and just thinking outside the box. You might need something like automation. You might need RPA. And that's how you open up the discussion of RPA. Once you've kind of done a bit of reengineering, a bit of DIY yourself. So there's a journey that goes on. A lot of companies have gone through that journey multiple times. So if you have, just bring that up again and use that as an example. Then as a company is getting better understanding, implementing RPA, tackling those repetitive, more simple, low-hanging fruits and making a killing in terms of savings, becoming better, more structured, knowing better what the employees are doing because you're analyzing processes and data better, then it's a good time to start talking about something more sophisticated, like using RPA with OCR technology. For those who don't know, OCR technology is optical character recognition. It's the bot's ability to see the characters on the screen, okay? Or combining RPA with something called NLP, natural language processing, which is the bot's ability to interpret language it sees on the screen. So to give you an example, RPA could be, it looks at an inbox in Outlook. If it receives an email from a certain client who is time sensitive, it's able to open it using RPA, read what's on the screen using OCR, interpret what the client is asking using NLP, and then depending on what you've told the bot to do, it can action that if the client's asking for a simple report that's ready, or if the client's asking for something more sophisticated, it then tells a human something needs to get done, and it puts it up the priority ladder. That's an example of how RPA can be used with other cognitive technologies. Then you have, fully fledged AI, which is, very sophisticated NLP models, very sophisticated OCR models, deep learning, and off the data lakes that you've built with deep learning, then using machine learning in order to teach bots how to behave and what to do under different circumstances. So we'll go into that a little bit more later. So that's my advice. You gotta take it step by step. You can't jump in straight to AI. I would say that over 90% of companies that jump into AI straight away without having some experience of automation is going to most likely fail and blow a whole load of money. So bad idea. And I'm sure some of you might have seen that in your companies already. So just to kind of visualize a little bit better, what does this journey look like? This journey I kind of described. Let's go into it in a little bit more detail, okay? First of all, the company culture has got to be right. You can get the best data scientists, you can get the best automation people. If the company doesn't want to improve, it doesn't want to innovate and collaborate, it's not going to work. It's going to be a massive hindrance to an automation program. It's always a good sign in a company if they are willing to change, if they're willing to get better. They most likely would have set up a transformation office or an innovation office, which looks at tackling difficult problems using cutting-edge technology or using, certain other applications or teams out there outside of your company that don't exist today. So that's always a good sign. If you have that, those are the people you should be talking to. Those are the people you should be collaborating with in order to create change in the company and to build a vision and strategy for the future. Like I was saying, it needs to start off, feet in the ground. Take care of the really low-hanging fruits you can do through just re-engineering and just thinking leaner. So your company has to go through a short evolution there. Then introduce the topic of RPA once your really low-hanging fruits for engineering go away. Get RPA, into the system. Get a couple of proofs of concepts, set up if you have to. I don't believe in proofs of concepts myself. Get it going. Get a couple of good use cases out there of RPA really working. Pick very simple tasks. I'm sure in every company there are some very boring, mundane tasks that if you automate it over a 3-6 months period, it's going to generate a lot of savings. Go after 1 or 2 good examples at first. Don't try to boil the ocean. Once you start doing that, you'll realize that you need very good BPM tools. So that's business process mapping tools. So these are tools such as the recorded tool that UiPath has, tools such as Process Gold, Fortress IQ, Signovio, Maximize IT has some great solutions there too. Use something to map processes, because one of the biggest issues in automation is a BA who has never done a process in an automation team, sitting with the business, mapping out a process that he or she has never done, and then giving that to the developer. What's going to happen most likely is that there's going to be a lot of change requests last minute coming in. It's going to delay the project. There's a massive risk that the bot might not be of good quality. So Get people who are doing the process to give you the process. Don't try to get a BA to become an expert in every process. That doesn't work. So get them to use a BPM tool. Get them to give you the process map of what they're doing. What is it that they want to automate? Very key ingredient. That's something that's really saved me a number of times. Later on, as you get more advanced to this journey, as you hire better people, the topic of process mining should definitely be on your agenda. Process mining is the ability to understand what your business does without having to necessarily rely on SMEs, subject matter experts, to give you processes to automate. There are a number of tools there that exist out in the market. It's basically you looking at your company and doing some business intelligence on what are the pain points. And it gives you a very good direction of where to look at in terms of where should automation be existing, where and what departments should the discussion of automation be taking place. So process mining, very difficult one to crack, but I have many ideas around that. I have many things that I've done, tried and tested. Just connect with me offline. I can definitely help you with that. Before you ever embark into the journey of AI, there needs to be a very clear, a very succinct strategy around data management. And I don't mean just data flows from one system to another. I mean big data management, which is a whole topic in itself. If you don't have a data strategy from the beginning and you try to get into AI, you're going to burn a lot of money. You're going to be sitting around with your fingers twiddling, and you're not going to get a lot of things done because it takes a long time for a company to implement a proper big data strategy that takes care of all the data needs of that company. Main reason being because many companies have legacy systems. Many companies have departments that don't talk to each other. It's just one of those big problems that a lot of companies need to tackle. So that needs to be right, or that needs to be at least on the journey of being corrected before you embark on something more sophisticated than RPA. Then you have other tools which will help you identify pain points. So tools such as, using desktop analytics, what are people doing every day on their computers? It seems a bit big brother, but a lot of companies use it. It identifies a lot of pain points. It identifies how different teams are working on the same processes across different departments and countries. I think it's useful. It can be introduced in a way into a company that it doesn't seem like it's big brother. You can anonymize the data so that nobody's name is coming up on the data. Manual touch points is basically tools that you can get out there that can analyze, how manual is a process, how manual is a department, and ultimately how manual is a company. So it's the number of times that people click their mouse, number of times that people click their keyboard. The more clicks, the more manual process is. That's the idea there. The idea is that you measure that from the beginning, and as RPA is, continuing to grow and evolve in the company, the number of manual touch points in that company should go down over time. That's the idea, because a lot of the manual work will end up getting done by robots. Reusability is basically the automations team ability to index code correctly, to make sure they're setting up their library of code correctly, so that when they have a similar automation idea come on their table, they're not having to start from scratch. They're taking existing code that's tried and tested and making tweaks in order to deliver a new automation ask, much quicker, more safely, etc. So those are big topics on their own as well. Again, happy to discuss offline. Just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Then you start getting into the cognitive, intelligent automation space, which is RPA mixed with OCR and LP or chatbots, like I described earlier. Probably more quickly than not, most processes that you face are not going to be simple, reconciliations. They're not going to be simple, transferring data from one system to another. It's not going to be filling out a form. It's going to require the fact that you need to open up a document. It's going to require the fact that, you need to communicate with someone to get a piece of information back so you can continue with your process. So most processes, when you look at it from end to end, it will need some form of cognitive automation capability. Usually, RPA isn't enough when you try to cover a process end to end, and if it's a process that is of significance in the company. So that kind of answers the question at the beginning of the presentation. Then, your team is going to have to go through another transformation. I just put it there for those people who love project management. You can start off doing, re-engineering RPA in waterfall. That's fine. Again, people want to be sexy and say that they do agile, we're an agile team, etc. Don't be fooled by that. A lot of companies and people don't believe agile exists. That's a little controversial. Some people might scream at me for saying that. But true agile in the textbook form that it's described, very difficult to make that happen. So waterfall is fine. It kind of paces the team to slowly understand this better. It gives the company time to digest this massive change that's coming. Then over time, your team is going to learn how to develop things, in pieces, not making a stakeholder wait, 3 to 6 months to get a robot. They might need to wait a month, and they'll get pieces of that robot over time. So that team will go from being waterfall to wagile, which is waterfall mixed with agile. Then once you've started, using intelligent automation, which is RPA with, OCR and NLP, you start getting to the space of AI. You start getting to, that flagpole moment where you stick it in the ground and you say, I have AI capabilities. Then everything changes because you start stepping away from RPA a little bit. That's kind of gone, dusted. Everybody understands it. It's still going. There's still loads of requests for RPA cases. But then, the whole picture of intelligent automation starts growing. People start seeing the whole point of OCR and NLP. If we just take a step back for a second, the way I like to describe it is, RPA is the arm, is the fingers of a worker, is the person's ability to click something on the screen, to type something on the keyboard. It's the basic. It's a bit like a person without a head and a brain, or a very small brain. Once you add OCR, then you've given that person with an arm and fingers and a hand eyes. That person can now see what's on the screen properly, and they can do more sophisticated processes. Once you've given a bot NLP, it's basically the bot's ability to listen and reply back. So, if you add all of these things together, you start mimicking the very basic attributes of a human, the ability to have, to click on things, ability to see, ability to understand, and reply back. So once you do that enough, and you're really utilizing data now and structuring it in order to get good use out of AI, you then start getting into the whole AI world, which is a very different world to RPA. Again, very largely driven by data, and pilots, structuring of that data in a way that is digestible. And there are many forms and ways of doing that. Again, Maximize IT has good solutions for that too. Then your team goes through another evolution. They're having to learn new things. They're having to maybe develop things in-house themselves. It could be that some of the things you want to achieve isn't available or is too expensive, using vendors. Then there's a bit of a break off into your own AI team. That's quite common to happen as well. And as you're getting to that space, you start realizing, well, I'm solving a bunch of problems that my company has, but a bunch of problems that other companies have too. So that's when you can start commercializing and creating intellectual property. That's when you can start reaching out to competitors or other companies outside of your industry and offering them packages, offering them products, offering them services that you've created for your own company that you've managed to rejig in a way that can be offered outside of the company. Then your team then goes through another evolution because they're then having to become salespeople as well as people who understand their own internal companies very well. And quite often or not, once there's that curve of maturity has really developed, there's RPA going on, there's AI going on, and there's a mix of the two. There are data scientists, there are BAs, etc. It's often there's a number of vendors involved. It becomes quite expensive. A number of consultants as well. Then comes the time of, okay, let's unify all of this under one hat, under one federation, under one center of excellence. Quite often it's not good to do this too early because you do want to put a couple of horses in the race. And by having horses in the race, you'll see which team excels above another. And then, you should really make that team, responsible for the rest of the federation. Because if they've done things well, they've won the race effectively. So, definitely get your team under one unit, get everything reunited. All these break-offs of teams for RPA and AI in different sectors of the company, they need to come under one umbrella at some point. And that's it. It's a very long journey. It's a journey that you can get stuck at, at intelligent automation. You can get stuck at RPA, or very quickly can get to real AI capability. It just really depends on all of these ingredients mentioned on the screen and how well you utilize all of them. So I hope that's made a lot of sense. I hope that's helped. Of course, this is a lot more complicated than one-page slide, but if that's a map to help you navigate, I hope that that will be helpful for you in that sense.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danilo, and thank you, everyone. That concludes the presentation. I really hope you've all taken something away today from this. So just before we go into the live Q&A, we've got one final poll question. Okay, so what technologies are you using at present for automation? Okay, just wait for the results to come in. Okay, I think that's everyone. That's some pretty interesting results. So 89% are using RPA, 22% are using AI, 44% are using OCR, 22% are using NLP, and 11% are using a decision management tool.
Very interesting indeed. Yeah.
Okay. So just before we go into the live Q&A, everyone, if you could just think of some questions to ask Danilo, if you could write them in, I'll read them out, and Danilo will very kindly answer your questions. Just wait for some questions to come in. Okay. Danilo, what assessments do you think organizations can do to determine if they're getting enough from RPA, and what metrics would you suggest using?
It's just like it's on there on the one pager. I think one of the things that could be used is basic thing is looking at has your company become less manual. So like I said before, using manual touch points as a measurement. If you see the amount of clicks in the mouse and the keyboard go down over time per head, that's because automation is really making a difference in the company. That's a great, very high level measurement. If you have something like desktop analytics where you understand what the company is doing, and over time you can see how maybe some red zones, companies are using, let's say a team is using 8 hours of Excel a day when there's only 9 or 10 hours in the day, that means they're doing a lot of manual work. So over time, if you see that at hotspot of Excel usage go down over time to maybe 5 or 6 hours average, that's generally because you've done something to automate that work and they need less time on Excel, usually having to do less reconciliations, that kind of stuff. And generally, I think there needs to be an open discussion about automation. You need to have a discussion around, are people happy? Are the users of bots happy? Get them to talk as well. Don't only get the automation team to talk, get the users of bots to talk as well. And be honest, open and honest about it. Get them to, to say what's good and bad about it. Get them to highlight the fact that they have to do less boring, mundane work. And if that is the case, get them to talk. If that's not the case, go back to the drawing board and figure out what you're doing wrong and just fix it, because many companies are getting this right. It's time to, to jump on that wagon. And it's not easy, okay? It could be that you get it wrong many times and you need the help of someone else to do that. That's fine. Put up your hand. There's no shame in getting help from another company. It would cost you a lot more money if you don't do that.
Okay. Okay. What operation would you suggest starting to automate first?
Ooh, it depends on what industry you're in. But usually things like the bread and butter of companies, payments, receivables, reconciliations. Every company has to do reconciliations. Things that require big data sets. If you're transferring data from one system to another, RPA can really help there. Go after the really low-hanging fruit first. Don't try to tackle a task that a PhD employee is doing. Tackle a task that it's just that really procurement. Buying stuff. as soon as a stock has gone down of pens, get a bot to go and order more pens on Amazon and just look for the best price. A human should not be doing that. So just go after the really, really high repetitive, mundane tasks that have time sensitivity on them, that don't have many different scenarios that can happen in them. So things which are easy, low-hanging fruit. Just concentrate on that for a while. Most companies, stay on that journey for at least 3 or 4 years before they have to look for more complicated tasks to automate.
Okay, you did it. Another question. From your experience, which functional area of business is best placed to set the direction on an RPA program?
Very good question. A lot of companies, they take the stance that automation is about saving money, is about firing people. In most cases, it's not. It's about augmenting someone's role so they can do more work, they can take on more work more accurately. So often, the automation team is taken care of by the CFO side of the house, the head of finance. And that's often a mistake, because as soon as you put something under finance, it's all about numbers. It's about what's the benefit, what's the return on investment of automating this? Of course, that's an extremely important question, but immediately you put people under pressure from day one, and a lot of people, they shy away from that. They don't want to get involved. So often it's better to have automation as part of the COO side of the house, the operational side of the house, because they're there to try to make operations better so that the client experience can get better, so that sales have an easier job at trying to convince clients to work with them. So I would definitely say that 9 out of 10 companies should put automation under the COO side of the house and not a different department.
Okay. This is an interesting question to know. So the new buzzword seems to be hyper automation. Where do you think we'll be in 5-10 years time from now regarding taking automation even further?
Yeah. So hyper automation was coined by Gardner. It's something that UiPath have taken off with, and a few others too. It's again another buzzword. Hyper automation is the use of RPA with AI, like I described today. It's another word for intelligent automation. It's another word for cognitive automation. It's just another word. Okay, don't get too hung up on terminology. In that case, the future of automation is going to be that just as RPA has become more off the shelf, so is AI. AI is going to become more off the shelf. OCR. I wasn't too surprised that was the second highest use of technology on the poll, because it is a lot more off the shelf nowadays. You have solutions out there which you can just go and buy and make some tweaks. Of course, you have to train the OCR bots on what to do. I think that's the movement that's going to be happening in the market in the next couple of years, is AI becoming off the shelf, easier to use, less code intensive, less tagging intensive, less machine learning intensive. And the other thing that's going to really take off in the next couple of years is true process mining capabilities, companies that can show you, what tasks you should be automating because they present to you real mining capabilities. And I think language processing and chatbots, they're becoming a lot more realistic than they were 2 or 3 years ago because of the amount of data they've been trained on. So I wouldn't be surprised if, I've already seen that, already there are bots that exist in the chat world that are so realistic that it's extremely difficult for somebody to identify if it's a human or not. So that's going to open up the doors more to customer experience enhancement capabilities. So those 3 or 4 things are the future of automation. It's going to get easier and it's going to scale big time.
Okay, thank you, Danilo. I think that's all we have time for today. So that's it. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Danilo, for being our special guest today. It's very appreciated. Questions are still coming in, but please continue to submit them. We will send out a follow-up email with the responses from the Q&A, and of course a recording from the session as well. So thank you, goodbye. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Danilo.